Bridget, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thanks for answering. Thanks.
Everyone to the Tuesday, April 27th special business meeting and budget hearing. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. This might not really work. I'm going to apologize for the darkness on us because if I turn the lights on, I can't see you guys and I can't see the questions if they come up. We're going to have to figure this out if we continue. So we're going to start with the budget hearing, and Kathy Dunn, because I can't see everybody on there. Kathy Dunn, if you're on, can you unmute yourself? So maybe we're going to let Mr. Press go first because Mrs. Dunn was going to do the library budget. So we will do the West Hempstead budget first.
It's available. Should I share it? Okay.
Can you just click on the presentation?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me here. We are doing the last of our official budget presentations. Tonight's presentation is the budget hearing. This is a hearing that is required by law. So we are going to for those of you who have been through the budget presentations before, this will be a lot of familiar territory. For those who are new, welcome, and we'll walk through this. And if you have questions, just let me know. I'm going to start off a little different than we usually do. Just want to talk about a couple of things you may have heard about on the news or read about in the newspaper. The first we want to talk about is pre-K. Pre-K has always been a goal here in West Hempstead. In fact, the work that is being done to construct the new pre-K spaces was actually voted on by the community back in 2016. And we are happy to finally be at the stage where we're doing the work to construct the new pre-K classroom spaces. So this has been in the works for a while. The work actually is set to begin to a certain degree next week. And we hope to have completion by the fall. As you may have seen in the newspaper, if you look at the state aid runs, we were allocated approximately $286,000 to fund pre-K. That amounts based on the formula that the state uses to approximately 53 four-year-old students for a full year for full day pre-K. Just some caveats there. If our program runs for less than a full year, which is likely the case for next year due to the construction, that aid would be reduced proportionately. In addition, we are required by law to share at least 10% of that funding with local pre-K providers. Vince, can you click yours not working? Excellent, thank you. The other thing you may have read about is the federal stimulus funds that were allocated to schools. We were fortunate to have received two different allocations, one from the December stimulus package and one from the March stimulus package. The first stimulus allocated to us $1.7 million, the second $2.1 million. These are one-time non-recurring allocations. And so what we're looking to use them on for the most part is non-recurring expenses, because this money will go away and it will not come back. So the fiscally responsible thing for us to do would be to spend that money on non-recurring expenses. There are some rules and guidelines that we have to follow. We are waiting for further clarification and more detail. The funds can be used for more than 1 year, and in some cases have to be used over more than 1 year. In addition, at least 20% must be spent on addressing learning loss. We are waiting for additional guidance on what exactly counts as addressing learning loss. But there were some other provisions in the guidance to kind of direct us as to what we can spend on. They're listed here, and they include things like mental health, summer and after school programs, and school facility repairs and improvements to reduce the risk of virus transmission. We've started having some preliminary conversations about that and possibly replacing the unit ventilators at the secondary level. We have already replaced the unit ventilators in the elementary schools here. And what those are, for those who may not know, are the devices that help to heat the rooms and also bring fresh air into the space. So we've upgraded some of them over the past, including some of in the new STEM labs. They have new unit ventilators there. So we are waiting further guidance on this. And the one thing that we can say is that these funds, as directed by the New York State Education Department, are accounted for in the special aid fund, which is where we account for our grants, and not as part of the general fund budget. The general fund budget is the budget that the community will vote on. So despite what you may have heard or read, these funds actually cannot be used to reduce the tax levy because they are accounted for in a completely different fund. So we're waiting further guidance from SED on all of this. We do have to come up with a plan. We have to apply and get that plan approved by the state. So it is a bit of a process. So our proposed budget for next year that was adopted by the board is a $68.9 million budget, representing a $3.7 million budget to budget increase of 5.72%. It is supported by a 2.11% tax levy increase, which is within our tax cap for the 10th year in a row. I just will want to remind everyone that that the board did last year decide to go out with a 0% tax levy increase in the middle of the pandemic when things were very challenging. So we were a little bit ahead of the game. There are some districts going out with a 0 last year. We beat them to the punch. We did it last year. The law also requires that we present the budget in 3 parts: the administrative, the program, and the capital. They are laid out here for you. Administrative, just to be clear, is not solely administration. Administration is part of the administrative component, but it is not all of that component, just to be clear. And as you would expect, the bulk of the expenditures are in the program component, which is the educational program for the district. For those who are a little more visual like myself, I just saw a little comment that said people were not able to hear. Can you hear me at home? Yes, I'm getting a nod. Okay, thank you. This is the visual representation down there in the bottom corner. And we have generally 2 bites at the apple here. There is a budget vote in May. If that budget does not pass, we have another opportunity in June to put the budget up again. If the budget fails twice, we are required by law to go to a contingency budget, which would mean that our tax levy would go to 0%, in which case we would have to reduce the budget by the amount of the proposed increase, which would be approximately $989,000. This is our budgeted state aid comparing the 21-22 budget to 2021 budget. So we are looking at an overall increase of approximately $2 million. Our increases, the larger of the increases are in the areas of foundation aid. I'll talk about that a little more, and transportation aid and building aid, both of which are expense-based aids. So our transportation costs have been going up, and therefore our projected aid is going up as well. The building aid increase is largely due to the completion of our Project A and Project B bond projects. This is just a comparison of our original state aid budget to our revised state aid budget. The original was based on the governor's executive budget, and the revised was based on the final budget. So there were some modifications, including we have received an increase of approximately $750,000 in foundation aid there, and there's some other reductions in other areas, which netted out to a net effect of an increase in $725,000 in total state aid. So this is our overall revenue projection. Again, just focusing on the fact that for last year, the board decided to go out with a 0% tax levy increase last year. Forward a little quickly there. Otherwise, the proposed revenues are listed here, and they are unchanged from our previous presentations. Just in terms of the changes in revenue projections from what we had originally proposed to what we are proposing now, as I mentioned, the increase in state aid of $725,000. We are netting that out with a reduction in our use of appropriated fund balance in an equal amount. So the net change in revenue is zero. So why reduce the use of fund balance? Again, you probably have read and seen people saying, well, school districts should go out with a zero this year. I will point out that the school districts that are mentioned in those articles are districts like Hempstead and Wyandanch and Freeport, districts that received a lot more of an increase in foundation aid than we did. Hempstead, I believe, actually Freeport received $10 million of additional state aid in foundation aid. Hempstead received, I believe, $21 million. We are not anywhere near the realm of those school districts. So what we're proposing here is a reduction of use of fund balance. So we have increased the use of budgeted reserves over the past 2 years. We've held these reserves. Reserves are intended there. They're like a savings account that you can tap into when times are a little tight, and times have been tight here the last couple of years. So we have increased our use of reserves to fund the budget. Additionally, we have increased the use of appropriated fund balance over the last couple of years. Last year, when we went out with a 0%, we needed to offset that loss of revenue. So we appropriated an additional $935,000 last year to support that 0% tax levy increase. And this year we had increased additionally by, we had proposed a $1.3 million increase in the use of appropriated fund balance, which was largely using the funds that we had held in additional unappropriated fund balance for this current year, because we were expecting that the governor and the state would carry through with their threat to withhold 20% of state aid as they threatened at the beginning of the year, and that they did throughout the year, but that has been restored. And we also held additional funding because we were unsure about what additional expenses we might incur as part of the reopening to address COVID-related needs. So the increased use of fund balance, again, is like pulling money out of your savings. If you dig in there too many times and you don't replenish, eventually you have nothing to use there. So we're trying to reduce our use. And so we have reduced the use of appropriated fund balance for next year's budget by $725,000. Some challenges that we faced this year in budgeting. Transportation has been a huge challenge for us. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. We had budgeted for an increase this year of $850,000. Our expenses are coming in for our out-of-district transportation above what we had budgeted. So we have included that increase, that additional increase, plus additionally budgeted increases going into next year. Special education needs continue to increase as we get more students in the district that are classified and that need services. And our debt service has increased. You'll see that that is related to our bond projects. But I do want to point out that debt service is offset to a degree by building aid that we received from the state, as I previously mentioned. So just real quick on the transportation side, we transport over 1,100 students to 94 schools out of district. And there are two main ways that we contract for these buses. One is per vehicle. If we have enough students to fill a vehicle, a bus or a van, we contract for the whole vehicle. If we don't have enough students, then we will pay on a per student or a per seat basis. And within that subset, there's two different ways that we generally see these contracts, the rates. Either it's a per student rate that is flat for however many, for each student, or there is a higher rate for the first student and a lower rate for each additional student. These rates that are shown here are actual rates that we do pay. So we have had the misfortune of having three of our low-cost carriers either go out of business or be bought out by another company over the last couple of years. As a result, when that happens, or if the bus companies decide not to renew our contracts, we have to go out and bid them on the market. This first screen is just Acme Bauman. You may have heard, you may know that Acme Bauman declared bankruptcy late in the year last year. So we had to go out and rebid all of those routes. These figures here shown, these are actual schools, actual rates that we paid Acme Bauman, and actual rates that we are paying now in 2021. So this, you can see the rate for that first school more than doubled. So we're seeing a large increase in cost there, and additionally, we added another vehicle there. School number 2 increased from 5,600 to 7,850, and so on. So we're seeing a lot of increases in the rates that we are having to pay just for the Acme Bauman routes. Additionally, some of our other carriers as well, we had to rebid, so you can see the changes here in the rates going from school number 1 from $814 per student to now $5,700 for the first student, $300 each additional. We send 2 kids, that's $6,000 a month as compared to $1,600. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing in transporting so many students out of district. But on a more positive note, we were adding a additional teacher for special ed at the high school to support a class of either 12 or 15, depending on need and enrollment. And we've got some incredible initiatives that we have rolling out. This is a continuation of initiatives that we have rolled out over the last 7 to 8 years or so with the support of the board. So we thank the board for supporting us and offering these programs to our students. All of these programs are offered in order to give our students the opportunity to be career and college ready as they leave West Hempstead. So we've got a new personal finance course at the high school as part of our Syracuse University Project Advance program. It's Spanish for Native Speakers 3, which is a continuation, it's a new program and a continuation of our Seal of Biliteracy program. In addition, some new high school electives that are offered in consultation with and after gauging the interest of students at the high school. So a really nice list of programs here for next year. Additionally, we are expanding the use of and the rollout of some programs that we have started. So we rolled out the investigations math program at grades K through 3. We're extending that to grades 4 and 5. Connected math, which was in grade 6 and 7, is now expanding to grade 8. We've got a really phenomenal social and emotional learning program rolling out next year, Habits of Mind, which the administrators themselves took part in. We read through the book this past year. The expansion of project-based learning into fine performing and culinary arts area and phys ed and health. And the continuation of career exploration for our special education students and our Smart Start grant program. Some future plans are expanding and offering more college credit courses. Our science program, K to 8, which we're actually looking to roll out with the help of the federal funds, the stimulus funds next year. So we're excited about that. That ties into the next gen science standards, which are set to roll out soon. We're expanding our award-winning research programs, additional social emotional learning programs, the preschool opening, as we talked about, and some new track and field equipment so that we actually can host a full track meet right here in West Hempstead, and new phys ed standards. It's a list of our partnerships, new and continuing. that we have teamed up with either organizations in the community or beyond to offer our students incredible opportunities. The NYU Langone and Vision Scholar Program puts our kids out there working side by side with medical professionals to give them a taste of what it is to work in that field. We've got students from Adelphi University that are pursuing their teaching degree, working alongside our teachers here in the district, giving them real world experience in the classroom and helping support our teachers and our students. New York State Peer Mentoring Program and our Diversity Fair through Nassau BOCES, which is an effort to increase the diversity of our teaching staff here in West Hempstead. Primary project, which is for our K-3 kids, in conjunction with the Children's Institute and the U.S. Department of Education Talent Search Program. So a lot of really great things happening and more to come in future years. In addition, these are bond projects that are underway for this summer. They are not directly in the budget, but they are supported by the debt service payments in the budget. So we've got the Chestnut Street Pre-K Center that is set to be constructed this summer. High School Media Center, which we've seen the plans and the furniture and stuff. It's going to be an incredible 21st century learning space once that is done, as well as the Family and Consumer Science Room at the high school. High School Music Suite will get a bit of a refresh, and we're going to be repaving parking lots district-wide. Additional projects that we've got going on that are not supported by the budget, but that were supported by previous year's budgets or other funding. The kitchens at Cornwell and GW are set to get renovated this summer. And the high school auditorium, we're going to get that roof, the ceiling, sorry, not the roof. We're going to get that ceiling fixed. We're going to get some new lighting, and we're going to convert the former projection booth into a true sound and lighting booth. Additionally, as part of our Smart Schools Bond Act funding, we're looking to get new door locks and cameras district-wide. Our budget edition of The Educator is printed and ready to go. It should be arriving in your mailboxes any day now. So keep an eye on that. And again, it highlights the fact that we are within the tax cap for the 10th year in a row. And that includes our 0% tax levy increase from last year. Additionally, there's those points of brand pride, which highlight the incredible things that our students have been able to accomplish this past year. So keep an eye out for that. And just finally, please remember to vote. The vote is Tuesday, May 11th in the middle school gym, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Just again, we've been kind of hammering this home. May 11th, that's not a typo. That is different than the date in the printed calendar that you may have on your refrigerator. But we moved the budget vote up 1 week due to a conflict with the holiday Shavuot. So that's all I've got. Any questions?
So in the 2021 facilities, the expansion of the middle school gym supposed to be on there?
It is, yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, we are expanding the middle school gym to add some seating area there so we can have people come in and actually watch the games. We've got some really nice bleachers coming in. They will be just as nice as the new bleachers at the high school. No, so just to go back, it is not necessarily unique to us, although we are unique. We are in many ways. We bus a lot more kids to a lot more schools than most other districts on Long Island. So we budgeted for the increase in the expenses, so it should have no impact on program. We are looking at taking a very close look at transportation and trying to work with our providers to see where we can try to find some savings in there. it's tough because there's, again, when you send kids to 94 different schools, it's hard to find, and all over. I mapped them out. I created this map. I was very excited about it. I got laughed at because I got excited about a map, but it was interesting to just see where the schools are, and they range east and west, north and south. So it's a little challenging to cover them all, but Ms. Gandolfo has done an incredible job getting all the kids to school under the circumstances. Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think we did the numbers. It was about 120 different routes. So yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
Vince, can you put the chat box for me? Question come in. I don't see update. Chat is update.
Yep, that's it.
Just me? I know, I saw it. Okay, so I'm gonna ask here if anybody has a question, but in the same regard, if you are in the audience online and you have a question regarding the budget that Mr. Press just presented, please just type in the chat box that you have a question, and I will call on you and ask you to unmute. Does anybody in the audience, sorry, because I can't really see the audience here. Does anybody in the audience here have a question? Today, you have a question? Zero tax levy. Zero percent tax.
So the 0% was for the current school year. So that's different from the $3.7 million increase. So I think I understand what you're asking. The tax levy is the increase in the revenue that we collect through property taxes on the residents. The budget to budget is the increase in the actual expenditures from year to year. So, and why they can be different is because in a year where we get an increase in state aid, when our expenses increase, that increase in the state aid would offset our need to increase the revenue from taxes. So the tax levy increase is on the revenue side. The budget to budget is on the expense side. Well, yeah, I mean, one is revenue. So the revenue pays for the expenditures. So they're kind of they're two different sides of the equation. We need the revenue to cover the expenditures. So the $3.7 million increase is the increase in our expenses. The 2.11% tax levy increase is the increase in the tax levy portion of our overall revenue.
The next question I have.
I'm not as familiar with the divisions. I think you're talking about the athletic divisions.
Well, even aside.
Okay. Right, those are larger districts.
Said that 20%. As far as the appropriated balance, I want to leave it at that amount that we.
So we had originally held additional fund balance to potentially cover expenses in the current year. Because we won't need to use all of that this year, we're appropriating it for next year. That's the plan. That's what we had in the budget there that we were talking about. So we held the fund balance this year, additional fund balance. We didn't, we're not going to need to use the bulk of that. So it's available to us next year. So we're appropriating it for use as revenue next year. So we're not reducing, we wouldn't reduce our use of the appropriated fund balance because we didn't use it. One of the things what we're choosing to do with it is to actually use it to cover some of the expenses going into next year because we're seeing large increases in transportation and special ed and things like that. See if I can try to make it a little clearer.
Joe, why don't you give the example? Budget of 850, but over that.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing additional expenses this year that were not anticipated. Some COVID related, some transportation related. What we were doing in holding that additional funding was holding it so that we could use it as need be to cover expenses this year that we may not have been able to cover because revenue from the state was going to be reduced. But since that funding wasn't reduced from the state, we won't have to use that extra funding this year. So it's like holding money in your savings account because maybe you think, you're going to have a salary cut, you're going to get furloughed. So hold that extra money, don't spend it in case you got to cover some expenses this year, but then you don't get furloughed. So now you're getting your full salary. Okay, I don't need to tap into my savings this year, but next year things are looking bad because my expenses are going up. So I'm going to use it next year. That's what we're doing.
As far as the
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can get that.
Have more questions, but I'm just gonna let somebody else ask and then I'll come back to you. I just wanna, I'm gonna say this wrong because I can't really read the screen on the thing, but Mr. Schlessel, or I can't see the last name, Josh, I think that's what your first name is. I see that you're typing questions in, put where they are and I can't see them. They're not coming up on the screen. If you're able to unmute yourself and just ask the question that you're trying to ask. I saw it.
Hey, sorry about that. So I have a couple of questions. Instruction on the proposed budget is up significantly, yet the lack of enrollment or the enrollment in general is lower. year over year. So the question I have is what is instruction and why is it up if the enrollment is down?
So instruction, at least the instructional component of the budget, the program component, encompasses a lot of areas. Part of that is transportation. The bulk of that is salary and benefits, as it is in most organizations, not the transportation part, but salary and benefits. Those are the largest expenses in those areas. We have other expenses in there, professional development, other supplies and materials, but the bulk of that is in those areas that I mentioned. And those, expenses go up every year. Benefits costs go up, medical costs go up, salaries, contractual salary increases that we are obligated to cover as well. And transportation has been an area that's been increasing significantly, as I had mentioned.
Are we getting more state aid this year than last year as well? For transportation specifically?
Yes.
It doesn't offset the increase at all?
No, our aid ratio for transportation is about 63%. So, and it's paid on a 1-year lag. So we get state aid in the current year for expenses we incurred in the previous year. So when our expenses go up significantly in 1 year, we've got to cover that increase, and we get reimbursed to a degree of about 63% in the subsequent year.
Okay. My biggest issue in general with the budget is obviously that it keeps going up. Yet enrollment keeps going down, and obviously transportation is a huge factor in that. It's getting to a point where taxes for the district are very high compared to other areas, and we're going to eventually start pricing people out because of taxes, which is what we don't want happening. So that the main thing that I'm looking for is how to, one, reduce that. Is it consolidating schools potentially to offset or lower the operational costs or something to offset the tax levy that is the burden on the homeowners? But
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Zalik, I see you're asking regarding revenue received from free programs.
Yeah, we are receiving, we get reimbursed from the state and the federal government for meals that we distribute. That hasn't changed over the years. We get reimbursement for the free and reduced meals. We also get a much smaller reimbursement for meals that are paid. This year, all the meals in the school are free, at least the first lunch. If you want a second lunch, if you want snack, that stuff is not free. So we do receive, a good amount of revenue. We're not receiving as much revenue as we have in years past because there are fewer students in the school, and we're not selling as many of the a la carte items and additional meals as we have in the past. And we do have expenses that offset that. Lunch monitors, the cafeteria supervisors, at the older students as well.
In the district even prior to getting that money in regard to SEL programs for district. I know that Ms. Karras and as well looking at programs since last year, actually prior to that in regard to getting those mental health services before getting this. Oh, it's not saying that we are using it. This is saying that we can be using. That I'm aware of at this moment, but this is what the government is telling us we can use that money for.
We do actually, just to jump in there, the windows at Cornwell
Right.
have not been. So we did replace the windows, middle school, high school, and GW. Cornwell, we didn't. These chestnuts are not that old. That's reimbursements that we get for special ed students that attend either public or private placements. They distinguish the aid plus public from the high plus private. Yes.
Dave, did you have another question?
Now, that's separate.
Yes.
Transportation. That's not a fund, like what Mrs. Hackner was asking about was if we were allowed to have a reserve fund for PRS and ERS in case additional cost or in order to pay out. Talking about the transportation line item in the budget, correct? There's no,
Well, there is no current reserve.
So there is the reserve, and then there's what we are appropriating from the reserves to use as revenue to cover the expenditure, the expenses. So those reserves can only be used, all of our reserves can only be used for specific purposes. So the ERS reserve can only be used to cover expenses that the district incurs when we pay into the ERS system on behalf of the employees, and the TRS, it covers the expenses that we pay into the TRS system. Yeah.
But it's separate. Oh, it's
ERS and TRS are two separate systems, two separate reserves. And we can only, I can't use the TRS money to cover the ERS.
I guess what I'm getting.
That's correct.
So that's already. Fund balance is some.
yeah, I get it. Some of the appropriated fund balance is being used budgeted amounts. That's what Mr. Kraft is trying to say. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm missing it,
No,
like,
no,
I think I get what you're saying, and then I miss
No,
it.
that's what I am saying, but. That's separate from the cushion amount that we plan to budget?
So if you have, so you have your revenue side and your expenditure side. So the appropriated fund balance is on your revenue side to pay for the expenditure line of transportation, part of transportation maybe, that's in the budget. Got it?
Part of transportation, but we don't know.
Yeah, that.
Depending on the year.
Correct, but my thing is that I don't think that.
It's not just for transportation. That money is not just for transportation. I think that's,
No, seen from what Mr. President. Yeah, of course. Separately, how much rice?
Excuse me. Yeah, we, just to be clear, we're not talking about the need to replace windows at the high school and middle school. They have been replaced. So I don't know if that was clear over the Zoom, the WebEx here. We were talking about what needs to be replaced, what building windows remain to be replaced, and I had mentioned that Cornwell Avenue had not had their windows replaced.
I just want to stop for 1 second because I'm still looking at the screen, but, and I know everybody out in the Zoom world is muted, but Kathy Dunn or anybody from the library board, if you're on this meeting, can you unmute yourself and just let me know you're here? Here or there?
No, I just said.
Oh, yeah, they have to do their hearing. That's. So I'm gonna just hold off a second. I'm actually gonna look in my phone because I think I might have her phone. But I'm gonna let Mrs. happen.
Yes. The line item budget is available on the district website for those who are interested in looking at things in greater detail. So they should be able to go there if they wanted to see what was transportation. Sure. Yeah, no, that's why we put it up on the website. If people want to look at that, if anyone at home does go look at that and has a question, feel free to reach out to my office.
Mr. Zeller is asking a question that I'm gonna try to read. It says the general fund had $8 million in 2013, is now up to 17 million. What are you targeting in these amounts? I asked in the past, I was told the slush fund.
I'm not sure that I understand the question exactly. I don't know if it's talking about the reserves that we are holding.
Mr. Zelig, would you unmute yourself and maybe clarify your question so we can answer you? Asking about reserve fund.
The reserve funds are not slush funds. Those are funds that we hold to cover expenses that we anticipate. So we do appropriate funds out of the reserve funds every year, and having those funds available in there now, and having money in the reserves allows us to tap into them when we need to in times like we're in right now, where our expenses are going up and our revenue really hasn't kept pace, particularly our revenue at the state level. Despite the increases in foundation aid this year, the foundation aid formula itself that was created in the early 2000s still is not fully funded. So, we are at this point in time we have been fortunate over the past few years, we've been able to fund the reserves. And now we are able to take advantage of that because of the prudent budgeting to use those funds now to offset some of the increases in our expenses.
I, Jay, go ahead.
You have a reserve fund.
No, it's not necessarily. We do use reserve funds every year to cover the expenses. What happens at the end of the year is if we have additional funding, we are able to refill the reserves from what we've used. So we do make use of the reserves. They are there, in times when we aren't able to refill the reserves. Then we can use them or use them to a greater extent to cover some of the increases in expenses. It's not always that we need to necessarily to use them. If our foundation aid was fully funded, maybe we wouldn't need to tap into the reserves as much, but it's not, and it's, the state aid is not increasing sufficient to keep pace with our expenses. Yeah, on the foundation. I mean, overall aid, the foundation aid has been the one that's been flat for a number of years, or has increased very, very slowly. The other aids, most of them are expense-based. So when we spend, we get reimbursed in the following year. Although the governor has tried to cap the expense aids, which would hurt us tremendously. And he's tried to do that the last couple of years unsuccessfully. If he were to cap the increase in transportation aid, when we're seeing increases like we're seeing, we would certainly be in a much bigger hole. Mhm. Yeah, and I share the concern of the increase in particularly in the transportation expenses. We have shared our concerns with our elected officials. We're in a position where we've lost 3 of our carriers that were low-cost carriers, and we're not the only one. There are neighboring districts that use Acme Bauman that have seen tremendous increases because they had to go out to the market and rebid their routes. So we're not the only ones that are seeing these significant increases in transportation, but it affects us probably a lot more than most, because most districts transport their kids in district, or the bulk of them. We're transporting 1,100 students out of district. We have about 1,800 in district. It's a significant percentage when you look at it from that perspective. So, we are obligated by law to transport students, so we do it. And we just kind of, we roll with the punches, and we go out and we bid as we are required to do by law, and we are required to award to the lowest responsible bidder, which we do. And these are the rates that are out there in the marketplace that we're seeing now. So we're kind of caught in a bit of a bind.
So I'm just gonna let you answer Ms. Bennis's question, and then Mrs. Dunn is on now, and she's gonna do the library after that. Ms. Bennis wants to know why it looks like we're reporting.
I can only speak to the last few years that I've been here, so I can't really speak to before that. It's some of our expenses that are budgeted. If the expenses come in under budget, and we are left with additional revenue, or if revenue comes in over budget, we are able to fund reserves. That's what we do. I don't know that we're going to continue to be able to fund the reserves, and now is the point in time when we use the reserves. And I think the fact that we were able to fund the reserves is going to work out to the advantage of the district. It's going to help us get through these rough times here that we're dealing with increased expenses well in excess of the rate of inflation in terms of our transportation and our special ed. So I think it was very prudent for the district prior to my arrival here to be able to fund those reserves. It's my understanding that a number of years ago, the reserves were whittled down and the fund balance was whittled down, and it put the district in a very, very precarious position. We are budgeting in a way to avoid that from happening going forward. Sorry about that.
John, you unmute yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. Sorry for getting here so late tonight. I think the issue that we're all facing, and hearing your presentation as well, is that there are certain expenses that go up regardless, and we have no control over those. And so we're always keeping an eye to that. And whenever we can, and we've done this in the past, the library has gone into their reserves. If there was an overage from the year before that was unspent, we would put that towards, whatever the current expenses were. This year, we were very, very cognizant of where we're at and what we've all lived through and how it might have affected people financially, this pandemic. So this year we've kept our increase to 1.3%, which is fairly low. It's probably the lowest we've had historically for quite a while in terms of a percentage increase. It is actually less than what our expenses have gone up by. But we also know that this past year, because of the pandemic, certain budget lines were not tapped out. So knowing that and knowing we would have a little bit of a reserve and a cushion in certain places, we have taken those funds. But we're also keeping an eye to the future and the fact that we have an aging building. Believe it or not, our new library isn't so new anymore. And so we know that there will be certain expenses moving forward. Our HVAC system is probably going to have to be replaced at some point. We've already encountered certain expenses, but we're hoping this year, and for us, our budget is so small comparatively that 1% is like $40-something thousand. So we're 1.3% this year. So we're hoping that that's a palatable amount for our constituents, and that people understand that we really are trying very, very hard to try to keep within those parameters that we know we're all trying to keep an eye on, but keeping an eye to the future and future expenses. So that's where we are this year. We're hoping that it should be enough for us, but we're, looking forward. Hopefully we can stay at that number amount, but it may not be possible moving forward. But that's where we are this year. So if anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Dunn on the library budget?
Okay, well, thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here, and you can also email the library. We'd be more than happy to respond to any questions you might have. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Kathy, for joining us. We're going to move on to the business portion of our meeting. Very short, just docket items. Need a motion to move docket 0-339 through -342. Any questions? Favor? Aye. Passes. Eve, I just want to see if there were questions about the budget. With that, I need a motion to adjourn into executive session for advice of counsel on personnel. Favor? Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.